1971 program, which started out focusing narrowly on the burning of the Everglades. But quickly, the delegates recognized that the burning of the Everglades was the symptom, that there were a number of other issues that were the cause, and that any prescriptions had to deal with those fundamental causes, and therefore they led to that list of legislation that was passed. Fourth is the human element. John DeGrove, who had spent a lifetime studying these issues, then brought his scholarly knowledge and his political skills as the chairman of that 1971 conference that was held at a hotel on Miami Beach, followed the next year by Governor Askew appointing a task force to take those ideas and put them into specific legislation. John was also smart in that he understood what motivated humans. The first few, I was on that task force, Earl was also named. If I misstate this, you correct me. But the first 2 or 3 meetings weren't particularly productive. People kind of drifted off, and these were tough, highly theoretical issues we're dealing with. So John took us to River Ranch Acres, which is a place on the upper reaches of the Kissimmee River in Polk County, and he basically said, we're not going to leave here until we've completed this report. And after 2 or 3 days, we decided that it was easier to complete the report than it was to stay in this place much longer. There was a final thing, which is luck. The president of the Florida Senate in 1972 was from Palm Beach County, and his name was Jerry Thomas. Jerry was a banker, been elected president of the Senate, and he had aspirations for statewide office. And he thought that one of the ways that he could achieve that goal was to become the environmental leader of the state legislature. So he had very good rhetoric, and he talked a good game, but at heart, he was really sort of a Florida commodity kind of a guy. The bill that he saw was the Achilles heel of this whole effort, was that $240 million bond issue. And the reason that it was the Achilles heel was because almost everything else was tied to its successful passage. Because there was concern, if you declare an area of critical state concern, and you put too many restrictions on it, you effectively are going to be condemning the land of private landowners. And if that happens, you need to have a pot of money to be able to pay the private landowners who have just had their property effectively confiscated. And the only way you're going to do it is to get this $240 million bond issue through. So it was key, and Jerry had figured out that the way he could be a public environmentalist but not have much happen was to kill that one bill. So he never would let it come up on the Senate floor. I sat next to another state senator from Dade County named Ralph Poston, and on a rather desultory day, Jerry had to leave the chair, and he turned it over to Ralph. And so Ralph's and nothing much is going on. So I stand up and I say, Mr. President, this legislation, whatever it was, Senate Bill 603, which was the $240 million conservation bond issue, is ready to be taken up. I move unanimous consent that we take it up. And nobody was paying attention. And Ralph, he didn't know what was going on. So he gabbled it through, at which point, Jerry Thomas, and I hope this isn't indiscreet, but I think Jerry had actually been in the bathroom and was still buckling his belt. Rushed in the chamber, but by that time, the vote had been taken. The chair had gabbled it over, and the bill then came up and passed almost unanimously with Jerry Thomas's quota. So never underestimate the value of luck or bathroom. I first met John DeGrove as an undergraduate at the University of Florida. He was a doctoral student at the University of North Carolina and was writing his dissertation on what was then called the South Central Florida Flood Control District, which is now the South Florida Water Management District. My father had been active in the creation of the Southern and Central South Flood Control District. My dad was what I call an accidental environmentalist. He actually did a lot of things that were environmentally positive, very seldom doing it because it was going to be environmentally positive. As an example, in the 1920s, when he had just come to Florida as an engineer with a sugarcane company in the little town of Pensacola in northwest Dade County, the big problem was that the land went underwater for several months every year. This problem was about to be exacerbated because the Tamiami Trail was being built across the Everglades, and as a cost saver, they had decided to eliminate the culverts that were going to be built underneath this earthen dam. My father knew enough about hydrology to understand that if you lived north of that road, if there were no culverts, that you were going to get damn wet, even more so than normal. And so he became an advocate for making the Tamiami Trail more environmentally friendly for the north to south flow of water through the Everglades. It was a worthwhile thing to do, and of course we're still fighting about whether to now go from culverts to bridges on that section of Tamiami Trail. But the reasons may have been commercial, but the outcome was good. So John wanted to talk today, and in the course of making those arrangements, we became good friends and established a relationship that has lasted to this day. In my next encounter with John was that conference in 1971 that he chaired, and then the opportunity to serve under his leadership on the first of the ELMS Committee, the Environmental Land Management Study Commission. Then in the 1980s, when I was governor, I tried on a number of occasions to convince John to leave the monastic environment of Florida Atlantic University and come to Tallahassee and resume his political role as the secretary of the relatively newly formed Department of Community Affairs. He agreed reluctantly to do that, took the 3-year sabbatical from FAU, and I'm pleased that he's now been designated as the most successful sabbatical in the history of academic life. He brought with him a depth of understanding of what all that legislation that was passed in the 1970s was intended to do, a passion to see that its goals were reached, and the political skills to make reforms as necessary to achieve their goals. Some of the discussions between John DeGrove and what could well have been his ultimate nemesis, a fellow named Dency Barron, who was the last of the pork choppers in the legislature, were scenes to be observed. I agree with the comment that was made that maybe the single most significant reversal of growth management in Florida occurred a couple of years after John left the Department of Community Affairs. The legislature in 1986 screwed up about as much courage as the legislature could do when they voted to repeal all of the sales tax exemptions as of the date that was about 6 months after that session of the legislature met. The expectation was that that was going to mean that the next legislature in '87 would have to go carefully through all of these exemptions and decide which ones to keep and which ones to discharge. It also had the effect of making services in Florida subject to the sales tax because their previous exemption was repealed. And then the idea was that the income that would come from that part of the sales tax, that was related tax on services, would all go to finance the infrastructure requirements of the various growth management laws. The fact that that had only a 4 months life, and then the political pressure became so much that the legislature repealed what it had done a year earlier, and there has not been any life into the concept of extending the sales tax to services, which is one of the most eminently reasonable tax policies that this state could adopt since 1987. When John left Tallahassee and returned to his beloved Florida Atlantic University, in 1972, a Center of Urban and Regional Planning, which frankly I thought had been named for John DeGrove, but I find out it was just generally called the DeGrove Center because he was sort of the spirit of the place, was established, and he continued in his final role, and that was the role not of scholar, not of politician, but the role of public educator, that he spent much of the rest of his life educating Floridians. A few of them in the classrooms that he taught, most of them in the general population of Florida. And he taught us what was the potential of this great state, what were those things that had been given to us so generously, our beautiful water, our land, our climate, almost unsurpassed in the world, and where we were challenged as human beings to add to those natural values, those institutions, and those values of respect for our environment and commitment to achieve a better quality of life for all of our people. That was the destiny of Florida. I don't know what John's valuation today would be of his efforts. I am an optimist. I believe that we still have the opportunity to make this state what it could be. It may in fact be that this period of slowdown that we are now experiencing, that may be an understatement by several degrees, will give us a chance to do some reconsideration of what do we want to do on the other side of this economic crisis. I hope we'll be wise enough. There's the old saying that you never want to let any crisis go unused. This is a crisis which maybe we could use to sort of restart our state public debate as to what kind of Florida we want and what it's going to take to get there. But thank you very much for this opportunity.
When all three gentlemen will be at the table outside, and they'd be glad to sell you a book and sign your name. Yes, sir. Marshall.
I'd like to get the panel's view.
Could you just identify yourself, though?
Hi, John Harper Marshall, owner of Marshall Foundation. I'd like to get the panel's views on the Hometowns of Artsy movement.
Okay. You want to go first, Earl? One of our panelists is just taking a personal break.
Not here. You and I have different views slightly. I guess I'm still a radical in a way, and I think it might be a good shot of energy in the system if it's upset for a while. Maybe it's because Senator Graham, I think a crisis is necessary sometimes. But I really think that there are good people involved in that campaign. I know many of them. And I think there's a reason to take a look at it, and I think it would cause us to take a look at it. I'm sorry that it's a constitutional amendment, But that has become the only way to change